Morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jackie Anderson, the Raising Wisconsin Director of a staff at Wisconsin Early Childhood Association. I am thrilled to have you guys be a part of our conversation today, talking about the legislative process. So some of you, I recognize your names. You have been with us for the other two trainings that we've had. The first one was on the power of parents, and the second one was on using data to tell our story. So we are thrilled today to introduce Katie McDermott. I'll give her a chance to do a quick introduction in just a minute. I also did want to introduce Rachel. So Rachel, if you want to unmute and just say a quick hello.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel. I'm the director of Wisconsin Partners and have been supporting some of this parent engagement work.
Awesome. And I did want to just really quickly recognize some of our parent leads. So just as a little context, we have 5 parent leads throughout specific legislative districts throughout the state. So Christy Cole in Mineral Point, if you could just give a quick hello. And we have Alicia Tickler, who is way up in Northeast Wisconsin around the Coleman area. And we've got Elaine de la Cruz, who is in the Kenosha Racine area. She is our newest parent lead. So Elaine, if you have a chance, you can, your camera on. If not, we know that you're with us. And then we have someone else who unfortunately has a really sick little one. So she is not able to be with us. Last but not least, I want to introduce Claire Lindstrom. So each of these trainings, we always give our, hey Elaine, we give our parent leads an opportunity just to tell a little bit about why they're here and what's inspiring with them with this work. So Claire, I'll give you just it over to you and give you a second to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jackie. So yeah, my name is Claire Lindstrom. I live in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I am a mom of 2 little ones. My daughter Genevieve is 6. She is in 1st grade. And my son, Teddy, Theodore, but we call him Teddy, he is 2.5 and he's in daycare currently. My day job is working at Chippewa Valley Technical College as a business development and continuing education specialist. I guess I got into this work because I saw Rachel's post in a group on Facebook, and I was like, sure, I can share my story for a gift card. And then she mentioned this parent advocacy work, and I thought, well, I actually feel like I'm in a fortunate situation. I can share my personal story, but I know how many parents in our area are struggling. I run a mom's meetup Facebook group, and just with the work that I do with my job at Chippewa Valley Technical College, I thought I was in a unique position to maybe move the needle a little bit and help connect some folks in our area. So my childcare story, we just really lucked out. I used to work for the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire. They have a childcare center affiliated with the university. So when I worked there, I got, I guess, kind of goes students and then faculty and staff and then the community. So I was able to get my daughter in when I still worked there. And then when I left, I got pregnant with our son. My daughter was still going there. And so we just kind of got grandfathered in, if you will. But our biggest challenge has really been financial. Just seeing the rising costs. Our daycare center has raised rates every single year that we've been there for a dollar, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. So with our wages being pretty stagnant and those costs continuing to go up, it does get harder. And then throughout the pandemic, it really, I think, been kind of a light has been shown on the issues with it. So last October, my son was on quarantine from daycare for COVID-19. We didn't have to pay for those 2 weeks that he was on daycare. Then my daughter got COVID at school. So my son was just coming off his quarantine, about to go back, when my daughter got it from school. So my son ended up being home for 5 weeks with us, so my husband and I had to, finagle that. And we had to pay for 3 of those 5 weeks. So that was like $800 for keeping a very healthy, at that time, 18-month-old home. So, and now just seeing the ramifications of that, our daycare, you know, they're trying to keep kids safe and healthy, but you can just see the, I guess, increased attention to every little cough and sniffle. So it's more and more days that your kid has to stay home, where you're still paying for childcare, but you then have to take off work. And my husband's actually out of sick leave right now. So for the rest of the year, that's going to fall on me then to stay home. So I just, and again, I think we're one of the lucky ones. So knowing a lot of other families who are on wait lists for 15 months, who parents who have had to drop out of the workforce to take care of children. I know we're in somewhat of a fortunate position that we have stable, reliable, quality childcare. But I really was called to fight this fight and really advocate for those parents that don't have a voice. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Claire. And a special shout out to Claire, and I know many of you others who were on the call for attending the governor's listening session last night. It was close to 300 people who were on the listening session. Many different breakout groups talked about the importance of a strong investment for childcare. So the $300 million budget ask that Raising Wisconsin is advocating for came up multiple times. So to those of you who were on, thank you guys so much for taking the time. So this is night 2, I know, for some of you. So I really thank you so much for being here and being present. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie McDermott. And Katie, I'll let you do a little bio of yourself, but she is one of our favorite people within Raising Wisconsin and is a huge advocate, as well as a mother herself. So we're really happy that she's taken time out tonight to be with us all. And yeah,
Jackie,
Katie,
you didn't, you so politely didn't use the L word, which I appreciate,
Good.
but hi everyone, I'm Katie McDermott. I'm one of the lobbyists for WICA, which is a word that I know people like to cringe with, but I'm just gonna share my screen. Just give me a second to get this queued up.
I've got it if you need me to have it pull it up.
All right, hold on. It always takes me like a second to, hold on. Here's, that's not what I want. All right.
Rachel or Claire, did it? Oh, there, the recording should come up. Okay.
And where's the present? There we go.
Oh.
Okay. So you can hear me okay? Okay.
Yep.
Hello everyone. Super excited to talk to you all, and I'm gonna get rid of these for a second. Otherwise, I feel like I'm going to be shouting. So I'm Katie McDermott. I'm a lobbyist at Hamilton Consulting Group. We are a government relations firm. And I have been working with WICA now for a couple of years. I can't keep track of it all. I think since 2019, and have been part of this Raising Wisconsin work. So my job is I am the actual people that go and talk to the legislators and the governor's office and the state agencies on behalf of Raising Wisconsin to advocate for budget or legislation or anything that impacts the industry, and explain why we have the position that we do. I am a mother. I have 2 little ones. I have a 4.5-year-old who is still in childcare, and a 7-year-old as well, who's in 1st grade. So I have also lived it and been there, and I love my family childcare provider as well as our center that we go to, and I'm actually on the board as well of my center. So have lots of different feelings here, but some of this you guys probably know already, but you know, I guess Jackie and Rachel, like if there's questions or whatever, just please feel free to let me know and can just pause it. Okay, so just real quick on today, we're going to just go through the Wisconsin legislative process, specifically the state budget process. We're going to talk about who's making the decisions and when they're making those decisions and how to be an effective advocate. Before we do that, and I'm gonna see if this is gonna work, but I wanted to just make sure that all of you know how to find your legislators if you don't know who your legislators are. It's actually, if you go to the Wisconsin, can you see that? Is it coming up? Legislative website. No, it's not. Okay, because I am not sharing it here. Okay, well, if you go to the Wisconsin legislative website, just type in Wisconsin legislature, there's a place where you can actually include your address. What I would recommend is actually waiting and looking this up at the beginning of January, because we have quite a lot of new legislators that are going to be coming in, and that information is going to be changed. I do have a screenshot of it later in the presentation, so I'll be able to show it to you. Okay, so just a quick overview of the Wisconsin legislative session, because I think it's confusing, and I get that, and even the people like my husband still doesn't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about it. So I like to say that it's like a hockey game, because it's kind of just an easy way to remember it. These are really unofficial time periods, but so Wisconsin session, we are a biannual session, so we run on a 2-year period. So session always starts in the January of the odd year. So we are about to enter session coming in January. That session will run until they adjourn usually it's about March of the even year. And then after that point, they will adjourn, they will sine die, which means they gavel out. And after that, they only come back in if it's for a special session. And that's pretty rare. So they are off campaigning after that point. So we are going to be going into the first period of this process, which for all of us that kind of work in this world is really largely focused on the state budget, because the state budget is the one bill that has to be passed every single session. And that is going to take up most of the focus for this first 6-month period. And that is also where the work that you guys are going to be doing is going to largely occur. We're going to spend some more time understanding that. After the budget wraps up, it doesn't have to be wrapped up by the end of June, but it's supposed to be wrapped up by the end of June. Assuming that's the case, then, usually there's a little bit of a quiet, like just legislators will kind of go back, do their 4th of July parades, things like that. Then they'll come back in for what we call fall session. That's usually when you see a little bit more themes, bill packages, that kind of stuff. Usually that wraps and gets a little bit more quiet by hunting time, because we're Wisconsin. And then the third period is what end of session, also known as silly season, or I call it the shit show, where it's just a bunch of bills, tons and tons of activity, and is really when, we see some of the crazy things. I think this is really confusing, but one of the things is session is used kind of 2 different ways. It's used to talk about the entire time, the period that I just talked about. So first period through third period, but it's also used, legislators set their calendar and they pick days that they're actually they could be in session. And in that term, I'm meaning actually on the floor passing bills. And then they'll pick days within that period that they'll choose to actually be on the floor. So it might get a little bit confusing, because sometimes you'll hear people like, oh, well, they'll be in session then. But they're like in session, essentially is the way it works. So I know that terminology can get confusing for those that are in the weeds of this. So as probably all of you know, we are a purple state here in Wisconsin. We are split government, and it is pretty much status quo from where we left off prior to the election. So Governor Evers is a Democrat. He has the ability to appoint all of the leadership of all the state agencies. And he is actually going to be the one that writes the budget first. The one that I just wanted us to make sure we knew about was the Department of Children and Families. That is the agency that largely funds childcare. It's currently what Child Care Counts, which is the program we're talking about with the $300 million, is completely being administratively supportive out of. And then on the legislative side, we've got Republicans that dominate both houses. Within the 99 seats, we've got the GOP with a 64-35 majority. In the Senate, we've got a 21-11 majority. And right now there is one seat that is vacant. The Senate actually did achieve a supermajority, allowing them to override the governor's veto. However, with that vacancy, they don't have it active, and so that race would decide whether or not they have a supermajority. However, a supermajority is only really relevant if both houses have it, because you need it in both houses in order to override those vetoes of the bills.
Katie, can I ask
Yeah.
where's the vacancy and how that works and gets filled, I guess?
Yeah, so the vacancy is in Senator Darling's district. She's the retiring outgoing legislator. It's like in the North Milwaukee area, so like Mequon area, River Hills, I think it's called, is the exact district. And it right now, the governor called a special session, and that session will align with the Supreme Court election in April. And there'll be a primary for that seat in, I think it's in February. I think it's the second week of February. Right now, it's already getting crowded. I think there's at least 3, maybe 4 candidates in there on the Republican side and 1 Democrat for now. So they'll have the primary within the 2 parties. Whoever comes out on the Republican side and whoever comes out on the Democrat side will then go into that special election. So, I mean, it's really for those that are in that area, it's important, but for the rest of us, it's really more just to know whether or not they get the supermajority or not. There are some things they can do with the supermajority, like mess with some of the appointees and technically impeach the governor. But I don't think those things will necessarily I don't think they're going to be able to pull those off with the large caucus. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Just a real quick here, and this kind of goes back, and I know we're going to be able to have this recorded, but a lot of you all that are the parent leads are in leadership's districts, and that's really key, whether they be leadership or joint finance members. So in the Senate, the Republicans, the majority leader is Devin LeMahieu. So if you see this, your legislator on your list, or you're like, oh, that's up by me, I'm in Oostburg, then okay, that's an important thing to note. Because I'm not saying that you're not impactful if you're not in one of these districts, but I'm just saying maybe you're a little bit more impactful if you are, because at the end of the day, you guys are their bosses. They respond to constituents so much more than you would even believe. So that's important to know. Again, Senate Democratic side, they do have a new Senate Majority Leader, Melissa Agard, out of the Madison area. Previously, that was Janet Bewley. So there is some new leadership on the Senate Democratic side. Senate Republicans are largely the same. I'm not going to go into talking about all these people because I just want to keep going here. I think you might know this name, the Assembly Speaker, Robin Voss, and I think we had the parent lead in his district. He is a very, very important man in this state. He runs a very tight caucus, despite the fact that it's a large caucus. And so he is pretty powerful over that assembly and making sure what gets in and what doesn't get in terms of both bills and budget. The other name here that's important is Tyler August, who's out of the Lake Geneva area. He's new to the position as majority leader. Prior to that, he was the Speaker pro tem, and he is very likely to become the next Assembly Speaker. He's young, he's energetic, he has this is what he likes, and he is kind of following in the footsteps of the boss. Also another important district. Assembly Democrats, really young group of folks here, Greta Neubauer and Kaylin Hayward. I don't even think they're both 30 yet, but energetic, and definitely Greta came in as the Assembly Minority Leader earlier this year and was reelected by her caucus. So I think, she's going to need to be nimble because the margins there are very slim for that veto override in the assembly. And she needs to make sure that her caucus is sticking together and available on those floor days.
Hey, Katie, someone asked in the chat why there's so many new Republicans.
That's a great question.
It's a good question, I know.
Well, I mean, I think it's a couple things. I think you saw a lot of people leave in this last time around for lots of different reasons. I think there were a lot of folks that, you know, were tired, that wanted to go do something else. I think we've gotten even more hyper partisan in this state. And I will say overall, moderates are kind of a dying breed. And so, you know, I think we started to see some folks decide to move on. I'd say the reason why they're all Republicans is because Republicans dominate the legislature, and actually both increase their majorities in both houses. So that's just kind of what it is, in terms of just seeing those larger numbers. Okay, this is just a real quick sort of snapshot of the state budget process. And I tried to color code it based off of kind of who's really like, where's the focus right now. So for those of you that participated in the governor's listing sessions, you know that we are basically in step 2 in the sense of we're in December 2022, and the governor is in the process of developing his budget and soliciting public input. So his state agencies have already said, this is what we want, this is what we need. And now they're taking those recommendations and formulating it into what are his policy, you know, what are his big policy milestones that he wants to include in his budget package. You know, what is he looking at in terms of a tax cut? What is he looking at for all these different pieces, and how does it all fit together? In February, he will actually release his budget. That will become a public document. This is likely when you'll see things kind of switch for Raising Wisconsin, and that will probably change how we speak about things. Depending on what that budget ask is, we'll be saying, thank you so much, Governor, for giving us $300 million in counts. Please support the governor's budget. This is why it's important. But up until that point, he may release little pieces of what's going to happen in his budget, but he won't formally release the whole document until February 15th. That is when his budget address is. That's when he more or less hands it over to the legislature, and then it becomes the legislature's document. Unfortunately, what we have seen in the last several years of having split government is that the legislature takes that document and they put it in the garbage. And then they basically start from scratch. And that doesn't mean that things that the governor put in don't get put back in, but it's not necessarily that they stay in, it's that they have to go back in, if that makes sense. So the strategy here is you do want things in the governor's budget, even if they get taken out or get scratched at the beginning, does not mean that they're off the table. You know, and so that's just kind of the nature of split government at this point, in terms of how things work. In March and April, another really important time period for you all is when the committee, the Joint Finance Committee, which is the budget writing committee in the legislature, they will actually go around the state and hold public hearings. And that is another opportunity for people to come and testify. Oftentimes they like to do those actually physically in person. They usually don't like to do virtual stuff. So those are key meetings, because while they can be brutal wait times, they do keep track of how many people come out on issues. So if people are talking about childcare and how they're concerned about the fact that childcare counts is going to end in the middle of next January, and we could see massive childcare closures, I think they're going to have to pay attention to that. So it is a really important time. Again, another time to pay attention to your inbox and make sure you're getting those Raising Wisconsin updates. May and June, this is when I don't have a life. Essentially, what that's going to be is Joint Finance will be voting on the budget. And those are really, really, really intense times where they're actually going to be making motions and deciding what's going to be included in there. That's when they'll make a decision whether it's going to be 100 million, 50 million, or nothing, you know? And so that's where we have to really make sure, especially those people that are in those Joint Finance districts, that they're hearing it from everybody, not just parents, businesses, employers, childcare workers. And then obviously me and the rest of the Raising Wisconsin team that you have in the Capitol will also be in their offices probably pretty much daily, if not more than that. The legislature will finish the budget in June. Whether or not the governor signs it is the bigger question. Interestingly enough, in the last 3 budgets, Governor Evers, his were finished on time. The last Walker budget, went until September because of a fight over transportation. So it's never really a given that the budget will be done on time. If the budget isn't done on time, basically what it goes back to current levels going out to into the next year. So it's not like we don't have a budget, like we don't have a shutdown like some other states do, or the federal government, but still that does have an impact on services that have a utilization at part to it and change over time, like Medicaid or other services like that. So it is important to get the budget done for those reasons. Usually the governor will have a couple weeks to review the budget. He can then veto it in whole. He could line item veto portions of it, which is within limitations because of our Supreme Court decisions. And then he'll sign the budget. Again, usually that occurs, it's supposed to hypothetically occur by the end of June. I'd say usually around early July. Okay, this again is another important side. And you know what? I'm sorry, I totally should have updated this today because I just realized they announced the last two Senate side GOP. So breaking news. Again, really important names to just cross-reference with your own list when you go in and see who your legislators are. If you're like, oh, wow, I'm in Senator Dewey Strobel's office. Okay, you're important. We need to talk to you. You need to assemble all your parent friends and talk to that man because he's going to be an important person that we're going to need to convince to go along and support a childcare investment. So that's just one example. The other two open spots are actually Senator Pat Testin, who's out of the Wisconsin Rapids area, and Senator Eric Wimberger, who's he's kind of by the Green Bay, Fox Valley. I'm not quite sure exactly of his exact like hometown, but they are the two going to be filling those two spots. It was just announced today. So again, important point here is, as your legislator on this list. As you can see, Republicans dominate the Joint Finance Committee. The reason for that is because they dominate the legislature, so they get more seats on the committee. That does not mean that those 4 Democrats aren't important. They're huge voices on the committee, and they will oftentimes really be there to try to push the governor's budget and try to keep the focus on whatever those initiatives are throughout the process.
Wimberger's in Green Bay, Alicia just pointed out.
See, I knew it. I just had it in my head.
That's right, you were close.
Okay, this isn't a cliff, like we're going to jump off a cliff because it's session, just so folks know. I had this up in another PowerPoint I did, and people were like, so I just wanted to put the disclaimer on there because it was a fiscal cliff. But okay, just really quick, and I'm not going to get too into the nitty gritty here, but I think there was a comment earlier about a lot of freshmen, and there are. And so we got 24 new reps and 7 new senators and 1 Senate election. So that's a lot of new people to talk to educate, and really these guys, they don't know, they're brand new to this job. They have no idea what they're about to come into. So those folks are really also important targets because they haven't been influenced yet by anybody. So you can influence them. We have really large GOP caucuses. That means you're going to be having a span all the way from those moderates all the way to those hard rights, even to the libertarians. How that comes together, how they get the votes, I mean, we'll see. In the Senate, they have a little wiggle room to lose people, but it's not a lot. And that is important. This is my favorite bullet. $6.6 billion surplus is what we're currently projected to have. That is a very, very helpful number for our ask because we have a big ask and we have a really, really, really big problem coming up. This isn't even including our rainy day fund, which is almost $2 billion. Checking my time. How am I doing, Jackie? My watch thinks I'm going to be asleep now, so it doesn't tell me the time. Okay. And then finally, we already know the speaker has come out and said that his bare minimum is a $3.4 billion tax cut. And that would be what he would even not consider reasonable. So that doesn't leave as much money as you think then for large investments like the one we're asking for. So how does that get reconciled between what the governor wants to do across all of his priorities and what the Republicans are looking for in a tax cut? And then finally, lots of federal stimulus cliffs. I like to think that childcare counts is not a federal stimulus cliff because we were asking for those dollars before COVID, and this has already been a bottomless hole that we've been trying to fix for a very, very, very long time. But making that case that we want to continue federal money, unfortunately, puts us into that category. So explaining to others how we're different and why we're different on that is going to be an important element of communicating with legislators. Okay, so that was the webpage that I was trying to go to earlier. So this is what you can do. You can introduce yourself to your legislators, and I get that they can feel intimidating, but they really are just normal people, and they really are just people that decided to run for office. So, you may get a new one. So maybe you don't know who your legislator is right now. We do have a list of freshman seats that we can get you. But like I said, come January 2nd, that will be live on that website. You'll be able to type in your address and you'll be able to see who your legislators are. Emailing them and telling them that you're a parent and this is something you're really concerned about does matter. And phone calls too. I actually would encourage you to do it sooner than later. Let them know now that this is a big issue and that you're focusing on it. Doesn't even have to have a request in there off the bat, but just that this is something you care about and you want to make sure that they're aware that constituents in their district are concerned about childcare, access, and quality, and also cost. Come to the Capitol. I know that that's a lot for people. They got to take a day off of work, but there are opportunities for both Capitol days, both for Raising Wisconsin. I know we're doing one. You can also request an in-district meeting. That's also a great opportunity. Then you don't have to drive that far for those of you that are like really far away. Sometimes they will do virtual meetings as well. Or they will have listening sessions at your local library or town hall. And so, sign up for their Facebook page, follow them on Twitter, and really just start to be someone that they recognize and, know who you are. This is a really important one. I know it seems like a strange one, but it's important. This is why I would encourage you to start earlier in terms of that contact, is reaching out not just for asks, but also to help. So for instance, if you've got that business, like the woman that spoke earlier, I think it was Claire, right? She's in business development at the Chippewa Valley Community Tech School. Like, let them know, like, hey, this is my job. This is what, I'm working in all these other areas, but you can also share, information about that or just the Raising Wisconsin information. And you can just be seen as a resource in general. I always like to do that with myself, with legislators, opposed to just being like, hey, I need this. Hey, I need this. And actually be seen as someone that they want to ask questions and, oh, maybe she knows the answer to that. This kind of goes to that wearing many hats thing. Yes, you're there as a parent advocate, but you do wear many hats. You're an employer or an employee. You have a family, you're a constituent. Oh, sorry, that was my dog. So you've got a lot of different angles there. And then building that relationship. I'm a big proponent of quality contacts versus over quantity contacts. I would rather have, if we were able to get 10 really solid parent advocates in Mark Lyons district that had had met with him and explained to him the problem, versus, 50 that sent a form email. So I think yes, there is a quantity game, but I also think that the quality, it trumps that. 5 minutes of research is going to help you. Their websites have their biography. They have a link to their own websites that they keep up. Well, they'll put information about other bills that they are. You can review what committees they are on. If they're on the Children and Families Committee, for instance, that's an important thing to note. Are they in leadership? Another important thing to note. Are they on the Joint Finance Committee? Another thing to know. So those are all different things that you can pick up pretty easily on their bio. Maybe they were in school with your dad. I mean, who knows? They've got all sorts of information on there, and you might be able to find a way to have that sort of connection. I think about this as studying. I have to study and know who these people are. I need to know what they're interested in so that when I see them, I can ask, oh, hey, Senator Nass, how are your cats? You know what? It's true. Like, knowing those things helps you navigate those relationships and can also help you as a constituent build those relationships. Prepare your points. Your story is the most important thing to share. How you experience that hardship or know of others experiencing that is something that you can bring to the table. But we also are here as a huge resource. Raising Wisconsin has a ton of resources. They have a toolkit, lots of information if you need the talking points also incorporate in there. But more than that, I always think it's really important for you to share where you're coming from on this as well. A lot of this is similar to what we just went through in terms of contacting them, outreach before and during, email or call. If you do that, make sure you address the legislator by senator or representative. Make sure you tell them who you are and where you live. This is important. Tell them where they live in your district. We already talked about sharing your story. And then this is, again, at some point here soon, we're going to need you to actually make that straightforward ask. So I would encourage you to try to do these initial contacts to introduce yourself. But then later on, when you are going to be having those contacts, you do need to ask them straight up. This is also a really great opportunity in person. Will you support a significant state investment for childcare? You can also look to Raising Wisconsin to help you. If you don't know the answer of a question that they ask you, that's okay. And actually, I think that's an opportunity to follow up. So always follow up if you say you're going to. And I think it's always good to send a thank you note. Doesn't have to be handwritten or anything, but just in general.
So
Yes,
Christy
Jackie.
asked how specific you need to be on where you live. So your town or your county?
I would be, so legislative districts are not necessarily drawn on county lines. So I would be specific about your town. I live in Monona. That's what you'd want to say. I'm a constituent, and make sure that they know that you're a constituent, because that's where that power lies. You don't have to give them like your full address or anything like that. I would definitely let them know that you live in their district.
You live in their district.
Okay.
They want to come to my house and have a cup of coffee. They're welcome.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Maybe I'll throw that address on there.
That's right. You never know.
And I understand, especially in these moments, feeling like, maybe intimidated also because the person that you have to talk to maybe has a different letter than you, maybe vote or feel associate. But like, I think that there's always ways to connect with people. And I think that there's always ways to kind of bridge those gaps. So like, you're not there to hash out every aspect of the political agendas for both Democrats and Republicans. You're there to talk about childcare. So there's no reason for you to engage on necessarily those hot button issues. I actually would try to stay focused in what you want to focus on. If you do have the opportunity to meet with your legislator, because getting into something, is just, you can very easily get yourself into a sticky situation. So I think for me in how I try to think about these things is, I'm here to talk about it on behalf of Raising Wisconsin. That's who I'm here representing, and that's my focus in this conversation. What Katie McDermott thinks is like not what I'm here to talk about. Thankfully, it's the same, but still, you know what I mean? But it definitely does have to. You definitely need to have that mindset. Yeah, Jackie.
I do just want to reiterate, and Katie said this earlier, but I think it holds value to say it again. You guys are experts on your own story. Like, that is the most important piece. And so don't even feel like, you don't have to necessarily know all the statistics, because I think that gets really overwhelming sometimes, but you just go in, and if you just know that, and if you just share that, that is really, really important, so that they can actually hear that, there is a concern that you have and that you've actually experienced it firsthand.
Yeah.
So that's it, Katie. I just
Really,
wanted to read it
it's
one more time.
really, those are the two, like, it's sharing your story on why you're there and you care about childcare and telling them to support childcare and asking them if they support it. I mean, that's really it, you don't have to get into the names of things or how things, that's not, you're not expected to do that. That's why that's what it's my job. So just a couple other key takeaways. I think it's really best practice just to track your outreach. I mean, that doesn't have to be anything fancy. I mean, obviously, if you send an email, you'll see it in your sent emails. But that way you can, if you don't get a response for some reason, which I would be very surprised if a constituent doesn't get a response from a legislative office, at least then you can follow up and be like, hey, I emailed you on January 9th and I didn't hear back. Just to have that own record for yourself. This is really important. This second bullet, not only telling other parents, tell your spouse. Like I think it's awesome that there are a bunch of women on this call, but we really need to be generating the male voice in this too, because that their lives and their livelihoods and their jobs are just as at risk here if they lose childcare. And I want more legislators who are unfortunately mostly men to also hear from men on this. So even if it's you helping your partner or your friend's partner reach out and navigate that, that is going to be helpful. I'm not trying to be like your voice isn't important or whatever, but like we need to make sure that this isn't a woman's issue. This is a family's issue. This is a worker's issue, and this is an everybody's issue. Also telling other parents that you are in childcare with, telling your friends that are in your same district, you guys could each get 3 other parents to do this. That's going to make a huge difference. So, while we may not have like hundreds of people on this call tonight, start to add up those numbers, we could have a lot more in those really important districts. This is so important. I hate when legislators tell me I never hear from people about childcare. I don't think childcare is a problem. And I'm like thinking to myself, it's like, well, that's because people don't think to call you when they think it's a problem.
Right.
And so I don't want legislators to ever say that to me again. I want them to have heard that it's a problem. Maybe they don't know how to solve it, but that they have heard from parents or all the time about the lack of quality childcare and that this is a real issue here. Plan that outreach, that early initial outreach in January and February, and then watch for alerts from Raising Wisconsin, especially during those key windows, the joint finance public hearings and the vote time, because those are really when the action is really going to happen here. And that's when we're going to need your help in reaching out to your legislators. I think that is all we have. I'm happy to take any questions.
This might be a stupid question, and it's going to show my lack of knowledge in the government, but do we just have one representative in the assembly and one in the Senate?
Correct.
Okay.
You have one representative and you have one senator.
Okay.
So essentially the Senate districts are bigger. And so within each Senate district, there are several, potentially depending on the size of them, representatives districts. So you may share a senator with somebody who lives near you, but you might have different representatives, but you personally only have one of each.
Gotcha. Thank you. I was looking at the map and Eau Claire is sort of weird how it's all laid out.
Yes.
So both of mine are Democrats, but I believe there's a Republican that also just got elected that's in Eau Claire, but just isn't my representative.
Yep.
Yeah, you do live in a weird area.
And I will honestly tell you, while I think being a voting constituent is more powerful, I would not preclude yourself if you work in somebody else's district, because, you are then, helping that economy in that specific district. And, so I do think it does kind of maybe change the way you maybe present yourself as like, oh, this is where I work, but it also speaks to this issue. This is what I talk about all the time is that, childcare, it is different than how we fund public education, because oftentimes it's a transient thing. I, for instance, live in Monona, but I have my childcare in Madison. So it being on my property taxes isn't necessarily going to help me here. So I think that just also speaks to why we need it to be a state help. It needs to be helped by the state. Essentially, the state needs to help us pay for this service because it's so needed. It's an infrastructure, just like our roads. It's a service. We still want to have that balance between businesses as childcare being businesses and options of in-home or center or whatever. And that's where I think, I call it's kind of transient. So I think that's fine too, if you're like, oh, you know what? Not worth it. I also think if you do have Democrats, make sure they know too. I mean, that there's
Right.
nothing to say you should only be reaching out to Republicans at all. I just, in terms of who has the decision-making power in the legislature right now, it's the Republicans. And so that's maybe why I put a little bit more emphasis on that.
Hi, Ken, were you gonna ask a question?
No, I just wanted to show my face for a minute, just to be nice.
Thanks. Thanks.
I
Good
have
to
a
see you.
I have a question.
Hi, go ahead.
This is Christy, and I am in Southwest Wisconsin. I am in Markline and Novak's district. And I know, like in this group, we sort of talked a little bit before about like some people in my district, we often feel like we are not heard by either of those two people. So it can get really disheartening when you are, your comments are devalued. And like what you had said earlier about meeting with them, like requesting a meeting in person feels like something that might be good for our area to do, because even when they don't, I mean, you can get really, you send some really very dismissive like response emails if you email them and things like that. But I do know that they both like the optics of having a like, here we are all together in one room type of situation. So can you talk a little bit about how, like the best way to go about trying to initiate, like say bringing a group of parents and requesting a meeting with one of those two representatives who don't necessarily always seem really interested in hearing from their constituents?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because, like I said, you're kind of you're important to them. And, I would think that, especially on the rep side, I mean, Novak hasn't had the biggest margins after a lot of elections. So you'd think that he would be willing to hear you out there. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple ways to do that. I mean, there is the opportunity to ask to do it in district, and say, this is that, which could be more convenient. You can also request a meeting at the Capitol, and actually come into Madison and ask for that meeting. When I request meetings, I will literally email the staff. You could email them all, or you can email the senator or rep's address, and say, I'm Christy Cole. I'm, a mother, and I'm a parent lead on childcare for Raising Wisconsin. And I have a group of constituents that wanted to come in and talk to you about childcare funding in the next state budget. And I mean, they should respect that, and they should take that meeting, because you're a constituent. And so the other option is obviously the Capitol Day that we're going to organize. And I'm forgetting on the date. That's obviously, what is it?
April 5th.
April 5th. Ooh, good date. Okay, so that's another option where those meetings will be set up by us, the lobby team. So they'll, if you register in advance, we'll get a meeting set up. The other thing I'll just say is meeting with a staff isn't necessarily like a diss. I will argue, like in some of those offices, the staff are, if not as powerful or more powerful than the legislator sometimes. And so I think that can also be, a helpful way to get to the legislator as well.
Sure.
But
So like
I get.
Yeah, so if you were to like say I'd let kind of do what you said and go through the we'd like to have a meeting with you where your constituents, and then they say, well, the senator's not available, but perhaps you could meet with XY in the office, that would, so what you're saying for that is that would be a good option to take that if that was what was offered instead.
Yes.
Okay.
It would be. I think so. I mean, I think that I take meetings with staff all the time. It's and oftentimes if that's just what his availability is. I mean, a lot of these guys, they are really busy, and the joint finance members, they do have tight schedules, but that's where you could say, if you did really want to meet with your rep or senator, you could also offer an in-district. I mean, I think that's where you may more likely get the actual legislator and not a staffer. But in the Capitol, they've got meetings, they're here, they're committee, there's all sorts of things going on. And that's just their schedules and kind of how they bounce in and out. A lot of times they can't guarantee it. They're like, oh yeah, well, we can put you down for 10 o'clock, but we're not sure whether or not the senator will be available. That's just because their schedules are kind of like that. My schedule's like that during session. I don't plan anything during the day because I don't know what my day is going to bring. So that's just kind of how in the Capitol is. I'm not saying that they shouldn't prioritize that, but usually I think when we do legislative days and have constituents coming in, I usually see legislators show up for those meetings.
All right, I do want to be cognizant of time. Any other last questions for Katie? Okay.
I guess the only thing that I was going to say is I don't think people realize what's about to happen with this situation. It is and I'm not trying to be apocalyptic or threatening or anything like that, but talking to other parents about it is also a really important aspect of it too. I know we just talked about the legislative process, but no one really understands what are you talking about? I don't think people realize that the state puts very little money right now into childcare. Maybe they do. I don't know if they realize that things are afloat right now because of all the federal dollars that we got and that those dollars are going to be going away. But this is a really real situation. And I think making sure other parents get that might help kind of pick up that interest, because I don't think people really pay attention until shit hits the fan, right? When their childcare closes because they don't have enough staff, because they can't pay their staff, because they don't have enough money or resources to do that. That's when people are going to call their legislators. Well, we need them to call them now, a year before that happens, is essentially the deal.
I think, so I know Shelley, you are a provider, and I know there might be one or two other providers on here. So we're creating a communication piece on what childcare counts means for me, because that'll give you all the tools, especially those of you who are parent leads, will give you the tools to be able to make the connection. If childcare counts doesn't continue, that means your program where you're dropping off your child may potentially close. And so that is why it's important that we advocate for it. So we're in the process of creating another little piece of another tool in your toolkit that you'll have, as well as Shelley, just so you know, we're doing the same thing for providers. So directors can talk about that with staff, because staff too, they don't understand. They're like, oh, this is great that we got a salary increase, but they don't necessarily know why that happened and then what could potentially happen in January of 2024. So, we're working on the back end to make sure that you guys have the communication pieces and so that you can articulate it in a way that makes sense. So that'll be ready at some point. We're working on it. All right. So Katie, thank you so much. I know you also have two little kiddos who are hopefully in bed right now.
Absolutely.
I always joke because my kids know when I do these webinars at night that they're like, I mean, maybe I can go to bed a little bit later because my mom's not actually checking because she knows I'm on the call. So yeah. So Katie, thank you so much. If anyone has questions for Katie, we talk all the time. So I can certainly bring those questions to her if we can't answer them ourselves. So gigantic thank you to Katie. I also did just want to real quick let you guys know that the next 2 trainings coming up will be January 19th at 7:30. So that was a little bit earlier because that one's going to be a little bit longer. We're partnering with Voices for Healthy Kids on that one. And that's the focus is advocating for childcare counts now. And then the second one is February 16th at 7:30, and that is focusing in on storytelling. So those will, same as what we've always done, they'll be recorded and then we'll post them up on the Raising Wisconsin website. So we'll create flyers like we've done in the past so that you guys can start getting those out and sharing those with other parents. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Rachel, any last thoughts?
Just a quick note that we do have a worksheet that follows up with this. And the task is kind of just to look at your local legislators, like Katie was suggesting. And so there's a form with all the correct links ready to go. So you can look at like, how have they voted in the past? What are some of their key priorities? What leadership roles do they have? And then how can you strategically connect childcare to those priorities? So that is ready to go, and we will work with parent leads on when that actually happens in your groups, because it's just a tricky time with holidays and New Year and snow and sickness. So that'll be one of your like next tasks, whether that's like in January, even into February, of figuring out who your legislators are locally.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Some
This
rest.
was great.
Night.
Thanks, everyone. Stay healthy.